I was 69 years old the day my son quietly turned me into a man with no plastic. 69 isn't young, but it isn't helpless either. My knees crackle like cheap speakers when I get up from the couch, and I need reading glasses for the small print on the back of the cereal box, but my brain still works. I still balance my own checkbook. I still make my own coffee without forgetting to turn off the burner. At least that's what I thought. It was April 17th, 2023. I remember because the date was printed at the top of the appointment sheet stuck to my fridge, right under the magnet shaped like a tomato. Financial Review, 11:00 a.m. Harris and Cole Wealth Management. My son, Mark, had insisted on setting it up. "Dad, you're not getting any younger," he'd said 2 weeks earlier, standing in my small kitchen and looking uncomfortably large against the faded yellow cabinets. "We should streamline your finances, consolidate accounts, get you into something with better returns. Let professionals handle it." I was standing at the stove, poking at scrambled eggs in an old non-stick pan that lost the non-part about 10 years ago. "I've handled my own money for 45 years, I reminded him. "Your mother and I never missed a payment." He sighed and leaned against the counter, his wristwatch catching the fluorescent light. Stainless steel, blue dial. The watch probably cost more than everything inside my fridge. "I know, Dad, and you've done great, but things are more complicated now. Online banking, fraud, taxes. You almost got scammed last month with that fake IRS call." I hung up after 30 seconds. I said, "That's not almost getting scammed." He gave me the patient smile people reserve for toddlers and stubborn old men. "Just humor me, okay? Harris and Cole are top tier. We'll move everything into one managed account. Makes it easier for me to help if something happens." If something happens, something already had happened. 3 years ago, when my wife Linda's heart simply stopped on a Tuesday morning while she was making oatmeal. Since then, every something felt like a threat. "Fine," I'd said, because widowhood softens your edges in ways you don't notice until later. "Set it up. But I'm not signing anything I don't understand." "Of course, Dad," he'd said quickly, leaning over to kiss my cheek. He smelled like expensive cologne and coffee. "You can trust me." That sentence should come with a warning label when large sums of money are involved. The morning of the appointment, I dressed like I was going to church. Clean navy slacks, the white shirt Linda used to say made me look almost distinguished, and my one good pair of shoes, polished with an old t-shirt on the edge of my bathtub. I ate 2 slices of toast with peanut butter and half a banana. Checked the weather on the little radio in the corner. 63 degrees, light rain in the afternoon. I put my wallet in my left pocket, keys in the right, phone in my shirt pocket. Routine keeps anxiety from chewing through your ribs. Mark texted at 10:15. "Be there in 10. Be ready, okay? Don't be late. They're squeezing us in." Us. I stood by the front window of my one-bedroom apartment, watching the street. The building is nothing fancy. 3 floors, beige bricks, a front lawn that's more dandelion than grass. But it's paid for every month with the pension I earn at the freight company and the savings Linda, and I build dollar by dollar. At 10:26, his silver Tesla pulled up to the curb, the kind that glides more than drives. He didn't get out right away, finished whatever he was doing on his phone first, then came up the short path, checking his reflection in the glass of the entrance door. "You look good, Dad," he said automatically as I opened it. "You bring all your cards and statements?" "I brought what you told me to bring," I said. I lifted the worn blue folder under my arm. Savings, pension, the Vanguard account, the house sales statement from when we moved here after Linda. Her name still stuck in my throat. "Perfect." He took the folder from me before I could react. "I'll hold on to this so we don't forget anything." I hesitated. The folder was like a piece of my spine. "Just for today," I said. "Of course," he said again, and we went down the front steps together. Harris and Cole's office was in one of those new glass buildings downtown, the kind that looked designed more for Instagram photos than actual business. Inside, the lobby was all marble and metal, with potted palms that probably had their own dedicated care team. The air smelled faintly of coffee, printer toner, and something floral from the receptionist's perfume. Soft jazz played from invisible speakers, the kind of music that's supposed to make you feel relaxed while your net worth is being dissected behind closed doors. "Nice, right?" Mark said, guiding me toward the elevator. They handle some serious portfolios here. You're in good hands. Serious portfolios, I repeated. That's me, huh? Mr. Serious Portfolio. He chuckled, but his eyes were on his phone again. Flick, scroll, tap. He was always on that thing. For work, he'd say. Deals. Clients. Urgent emails. We rode up to the 4th floor, where a discreet sign announced. Harris and Cole Wealth Management. Suite 402 to 410. The receptionist behind the sleek, white desk looked about 12. Her nameplate said Sophia. She smiled at Mark first. Hi. Welcome to Harris and Cole. Mark Dawson for 11 o'clock with Mr. Clay, he said smoothly. This is my father, Richard. Her gaze flicked to me, then quickly back to him. Of course, Mr. Dawson. You're a bit early. Mr. Clay is just finishing up with another client. You can have a seat. He'll be with you shortly. Mark nodded like someone used to being obeyed. Great. Dad, why don't you sit over there? He gestured toward a seating area. 4 gray armchairs, a glass coffee table with neatly arranged magazines, and a refrigerated drinks cabinet against the wall. I'm going to pop in and give Clay a heads up, he said. Save us some time. You said the appointment is at 11. I reminded him, checking my watch. 10:42. We're early. That's good, he said. Give me time to outline things before we bring you in. You know how these guys are? Lots of jargon. I'll translate. Before I could argue, he was already moving toward the frosted glass doors labeled Clients Only. Just relax, Dad, he called over his shoulder. Grab a coffee. Don't worry about anything. The doors closed behind him with a soft click. I lowered myself into one of the armchairs, feeling every year of my age in my hips. The fabric was too firm, the kind that forces your spine straight. A flat-screen TV on the wall played financial news on mute. A parade of men in suits, red and green arrows, numbers zipping along the bottom like they were late for something. On the coffee table, someone had arranged glossy magazines in a perfect fan. Forbes, Money, Architectural Digest. On top lay a brochure with a smiling couple in their 70s clinking wine glasses on what looked like a yacht. Retire with confidence, the caption said. Sure, I muttered. If someone doesn't steal it first. My throat felt dry. There was a self-serve coffee machine by the drinks cabinet, one of those fancy ones with touch screens and pictures of perfect lattes. A small sign invited. Complimentary beverages for our valued guests. I pushed myself up and shuffled over. An older woman in a navy pantsuit was already there, stirring sugar into a paper cup, a thin gold bracelet jangling on her wrist. She gave me a sympathetic half-smile, the universal look of one old person to another in a young person's world. Which one of these buttons gives you regular coffee? I asked her. She pointed. Americano. Everything else is just espresso pretending to be dessert. I pressed the Americano button. The machine whirred and spat, and hot, dark liquid poured into my cup. The smell was rich and comforting, better than the instant stuff I drink at home. Beside the machine, a covered tray held pastries, croissants, little muffins, something with a glossy fruit glaze on top. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the ride downtown had been longer than I'd expected with traffic. I took a small blueberry muffin, more out of principle than hunger. If they were going to manage my so-called serious portfolio, the least they could do was give me a blueberry muffin. At the far end of the lobby, near the tall windows that looked out over the street, a man in green overalls was tending to one of the enormous potted palms. He had a spray bottle and a cloth, gently wiping dust from each leaf. Groundskeeping for indoor plants. I'd never seen that as a job before. He glanced up, caught me looking, and gave me a small nod. His overalls had a stitched name tag. Miguel. I nodded back, then went to the reception desk. Excuse me, I said. How do I pay for the coffee and the muffin? Sophia blinked. Oh, they're complimentary, sir. No charge. Oh, I said, feeling foolish. Well, thank you. I turned to go back, then thought better of it. Old habits. I pulled my wallet from my pocket and checked the credit card slot. The blue Visa was right where it always was, behind my Medicare card and the folded photo of Linda I'd carried since 1982. Just in case, I told myself. Just in case they decide elderly men with pensions don't qualify as valued guests without a card on file. I sat, sipped the coffee, too hot but good, and picked a single blueberry out of the muffin top. Time passed in strange little chunks. 5 minutes watching the silent TV, 3 minutes scanning headlines on a magazine without actually reading them. Another 5 watching Miguel miss the ferns near the window. At 10:58, I checked my watch again. No sign of Mark. The frosted doors remained closed. At 11:03, the handle finally turned. A young man in a gray suit came out, tall, gelled hair, the kind of smile you only get after expensive orthodontics. He shook hands with a couple in their 50s, all laughter and shoulder pats, then disappeared back inside. Mark did not appear. I got up and walked to the reception desk again, the empty coffee cup trembling slightly in my hand. "Excuse me," I said. "Could you check if my son is still with Mr. Clay?" "Mark Dawson. Our appointment was at 11. Sophia glanced at her screen, then at the frosted doors. Her painted eyebrows moved just a fraction. "Yes, sir," she said politely. "They're just finalizing some documents. Mr. Clay will come get you in a few minutes." "Documents?" I repeated. She smiled in a way that meant, "I can't say, even if I know." "Right," I said, though it didn't feel right at all. "I'll just—" My hand trembled more now. I realized I was still holding the empty cup. The trash can was next to the coffee station, near a small sign that read, "Please present your card at reception if you require additional services." There was another muffin under the plastic dome. I hadn't finished the first one. I told myself I was being silly. These people probably charge enough fees to cover 1,000 muffins, but 69 years of living reminds you that nothing is ever really free. I stepped back to the coffee machine and poured myself a second cup, this time only half full. The caffeine was doing nothing to calm the knot in my stomach. When I turned, Miguel was closer, trimming a brown edge off a leaf with a small pair of scissors. Up close, he looked about my age, maybe a few years younger. Dark hair gone mostly gray, deep lines around his eyes. "Plant looks better than I do," I said, nodding at the palm. He smiled. "Plants don't eat hospital food, senor." I laughed despite myself. "You've got a point." He hesitated, as if about to say something else, then moved further down the row of pots. I sat again, balancing the cup carefully on the saucer. My knee bounced. I forced it still. The second time I got up, I told myself it was just to stretch my legs. I wandered toward the cold drinks cabinet. Rows of sparkling water, little glass bottles of orange juice, cans of diet soda perfectly aligned. I opened the door, took out a bottle of water, then thought of Linda. She would have scolded me for being so hesitant about a few dollars worth of drinks in a building that probably billed people in 6 figures. "Stop behaving like you're poor," she would have said. "You work hard. You could take a bottle of water." So I walked back to the desk. "Sophia," I said, "could you put this on file, or whatever you do? I don't like feeling like I'm stealing." I slid my visa across the counter. Blue card, silver chip, my name embossed in raised letters. Richard E. Dawson. "Of course, sir," she said, taking it with a professional smile. She typed something into her computer, then swiped the card through the little reader. The first beep sounded wrong. Lower. She frowned, tried again. Another beep. This time her smile flickered. "That's odd," she murmured, almost to herself. She flipped the card, tried inserting the chip. The reader blinked red. "I'm sorry, sir," she said louder. "It seems your card is being declined. Do you have another one?" I felt the way you feel when you miss a step in the dark. Like the floor has moved 6 inches lower and you're free-falling for a second. "Declined?" I repeated. That doesn't make sense. There should be plenty of money in that account. I paid my electric bill with it 2 days ago." "Try again." She tried again. Same red blink, same muffled beep that sounded unkind. "I can call the card issuer for you," she offered. "Maybe there's a security hold." My face burned. The lobby suddenly felt twice as bright. The woman in the navy pantsuit was pretending not to look. Somewhere near the window, Miguel's spray bottle hissed softly. "That won't be necessary," I said stiffly. "It must be a mistake." I pulled out my debit card, the one linked to my checking account, and slid it across. Yellow, not blue. More modest. It went through on the first try. Sophia handed it back, along with my rejected visa. "Sorry about that, sir." "No problem," I lied. I walked back to my chair, the bottle of water sweating in my hand, and stared at the blue card. The numbers blurred. Declined. The The word clanged around in my skull like a dropped wrench. I had never missed a payment in my life. Not on a card, not on a house, not on a car. Linda and I prided ourselves on that. We paid what we owed. We lived within our means. We raised a son who never had to worry about an empty fridge or a shut-off notice. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled to Mark's name. Mark. I pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before he answered, his voice low. Yeah, Dad? Can this wait? I'm in the middle of something with Clay. My card was just declined, I said, keeping my voice steady. The visa. The receptionist tried 3 times. She said it's not going through. It was a brief silence. I pictured him covering the receiver with his hand, giving someone in that back office an apologetic smile. Yeah, I know, he said finally. I canceled it this morning. I gripped the arm of the chair. You what? Dad, keep your voice down, okay? His tone shifted into that soothing condescension again. It's not a big deal. We're moving everything into a new structure. It didn't make sense to keep that card open. It's my card, I said, in my name. You had no right to cancel it without asking me. I did have a right, he said, sharper now. You added me as joint on that account last year, remember? So I could help with online stuff? Look, this is temporary. We don't want a bunch of old credit lines hanging around while we restructure. It looks messy on applications. Applications for what? I asked. He sighed. Dad, seriously, I can't go into this right now. I'm in the middle of signing. Just sit tight. Don't worry about the card. You don't really need it. Your expenses are basic, and I'll set you up with something more appropriate later. Something more appropriate. Something with him holding the leash, I thought. Mark, I didn't agree to... Dad, that tone again, a strange mix of impatience and forced patience. Trust me on this, okay? This is why we're here. To keep things under control before some scammer gets to you. I'll explain everything after we're finished. Just don't sign anything if someone hands you papers, all right? I have to go. The line went dead. I sat there with the dead phone pressed to my ear, listening to the soft murmur of the lobby. Across from me, the woman in the navy suit pretended to read a brochure. The TV above us flashed an image of a smiling man with a ticker under his face. Markets react to interest rate decision. My heart was thumping too hard for something as simple as a cancel card. But it wasn't simple. It was the way he'd said it. Like my independence was an untidy line item to be cleaned up. I slipped the useless blue card back into my wallet. My fingers weren't quite steady. Plants don't eat hospital food, Miguel had said. Old men without credit cards don't eat much of anything, I thought. I must have been staring at nothing for a few minutes, because when I looked up, Miguel was standing a little closer than before. He was pretending to inspect a small ficus near the row of chairs, but his eyes kept flicking toward the frosted doors Mark had vanished through. Senor Dawson, he said quietly. I blinked. Oh, do you know my name? He lifted his chin toward the reception desk. They said it when you checked in. His voice dropped a notch. I don't want to be rude, but I think maybe you should know something. His hand tightened around the spray bottle. He looked toward the frosted glass again, then back at me. I was outside, he said, watering the planters by the smoking area. Your son, he didn't see me. I heard what he told the man in there. About you. About your money. He swallowed. And about why he really canceled that card. He said it quietly, but the words landed like a dropped toolbox. And about why he really canceled that card. For a second, I just stared at him. Lobby noise thickened around us. Phones ringing behind the desk, printer humming somewhere down the hall, the muted flicker of the finance channel on the wall. Everything normal. Everything respectable. My heart, meanwhile, was beating a code I didn't recognize. Miguel shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Up close, I could see a dark smudge of soil under one thumbnail and a faint white scar along his left forearm, the kind you get from a careless moment with a box cutter or a piece of sheet metal. I shouldn't say anything, he added. But my father, he was like you. My brother, he gave a short, humorless laugh and tapped 2 fingers on his own chest. I know this story. The receptionist was on the phone, her back angled toward us. The woman in the navy suit had gone. We were alone, or close enough. What did you hear? I asked. He glanced around again, then tilted his head toward the floor-to-ceiling windows at the far end of the lobby. A row of gray lounge chairs sat there, empty, overlooking the street 4 floors below. Better I tell you where they can't listen, he said. Come. There was something in his tone that cut through the fog. It wasn't drama. It was weariness. The kind that comes from watching the same ugly scene play out too many times. I followed him. The view from the window made the city look like a toy model. Tiny cars, tiny people, everyone moving briskly as if they had somewhere important to be. The glass was cool when I touched it, a little smudge of my fingerprint ghosting onto the surface. Miguel stopped near the corner, between two giant planters overflowing with something leafy and expensive looking. He set his spray bottle down on the marble ledge and wiped his hands on his overalls. You see that little balcony there? He asked, nodding toward a section of building jutting out 1 floor below us. A narrow terrace with a metal railing, 2 concrete planters, an ashtray stand. I was there 10:30, he said. Watering, cleaning. People from the offices, they come smoke sometimes. Your son and that man, Mr. Clay, they come out there to talk. I don't think they saw me. He looked at me, gauging whether I wanted to hear the rest. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe this was nothing, a misunderstanding. Or maybe I was already trying to convince myself things were better than they were. Old habits. Go on, I said. He nodded once and took a breath. They were laughing when they came out. He began. Your son put his phone away and said, "Can you believe the house went for $750? I thought we'd be lucky to get $650 with the market." My stomach flipped. $750. The number came with a picture, a faded blue 2-story in the suburbs, the house where we'd lived for 32 years, where Linda taped every report card and Christmas card to the fridge. When we sold it 2 years ago, the final number wired into my account had been $742,000. I know because I wrote it down 3 times in a spiral notebook. He said, "The house?" I asked slowly. "Not Dad's house." Miguel shrugged one shoulder. He said, "The old place." Like you were already gone. My grip tightened on my water bottle until the plastic crackled. "Mr. Clay," he asked, "so all that is in your father's name or the trust?" Miguel went on. "Your son said, for now. That's what we're here to fix." For now, I repeated. My mouth tasted like old pennies. "They talk about documents," Miguel said. "About consolidations, transfers, some, how you say, power of money. Power of attorney?" I said, "Yes, that." His eyes warmed a little, like he was grateful I'd supply the word, even though I wished I hadn't. He said, "We've already got the durable power of attorney from last fall, so technically I can sign for him if he freezes up, but it's better if he just sits in the lobby. He gets confused when there's too much paper." I closed my eyes for a second. The lobby hummed around us. Somewhere back by the desk, the phone rang again. "I'm not confused," I said quietly. "I'm careful." Miguel nodded like that made perfect sense. "Mr. Clay," he asked, "you're absolutely sure he understands your restructuring?" Your son laughed. "He understands I'm helping him. That's enough. The rest is just logistics." Of course it was logistics. This lobby, these plants, those glass doors, all logistics for moving pieces from one side of the balance sheet to another while the owner of the pieces sat 3 rooms away eating a complimentary blueberry muffin. "How long were they out there?" I asked. "What else did they say?" Miguel picked up the spray bottle, more to have something in his hands than from any urgency about the ficus. "They talk numbers," he said. "Your pension, the investments, the sale money from the house." Mr. Clay had a paper with a table on it. I was sweeping, so I did not see everything, but I heard this. Between the sale and the managed accounts, you're sitting on about 1.1 million. I had known the rough number. I just hadn't heard it said out loud in a stranger's mouth while my son nodded along. Your son said, here Miguel's voice shifted, lightly imitating Mark's casual tone. "Yeah, but you have to remember, I'm carrying a lot of weight here. He's got no real expenses. His rent is under $2,000, utilities maybe a couple hundred. Meanwhile, I'm covering private school for Mia and Ethan, the Audi lease, the mortgage. For $1,800 a month, man." I could see Mark saying it, leaning against that metal railing, checking his watch while he listed his burdens. "I thought parents help their children," Miguel said thoughtfully. "Not children help parents, like a charity." The irony would have made me laugh on another day. And then he hesitated. Say it, I told him. My voice came out hoarser than I'd like. They talk about the facility, he said. What facility? I asked, though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. This place, he said, waving the hand holding the spray bottle in a small circle. Harrison Cole, they own part of a company. Senior living, assisted places. Very nice, but very expensive. Your son said, if we move him into Brookside by fall, that frees up the apartment and gives us more to work with. No more random Amazon orders or charity checks, either. I stared at him. Brookside? Miguel nodded. Brookside Residences. Out by the highway. They have pictures of it in the elevator you didn't see. I had. A glossy poster with a silver-haired couple playing cards on a patio. A slogan about living your golden years with peace of mind. He said, move him into Brookside. I repeated. Like I'm a sofa. Miguel's mouth twisted. He said, the waiting list is long, but if we put down the deposit now, we're locked in. You said you could get him in at a discount if we roll over his accounts to your firm. My fingers went numb. What deposit? Your son said he's authorizing a transfer today, Miguel answered. $75,000. For something with Brookside, something with you. He nodded again toward the internal offices. A placement fee and some commissions. $75,000. That was 3 times what I paid for our first house. I thought of Linda standing in the checkout line at the grocery store, carefully pulling paper coupons from her wallet. She'd stretch $1 until it squealed. We never wasted money. We never had enough to waste. Did he say it was my money? I asked. Or family money or what? Miguel frowned, searching his memory. He said, look, if I don't streamline this now, that money's going to wind up scattered between church newsletters and GoFundMes for strangers with sad stories. At least this way it supports the family. Supports the family. Of course. And the card? I asked. Did he mention the card? Miguel nodded slowly. Mr. Clay asked if you might object to all this. Your son laughed again. He said, not if he doesn't know the details. I've already canceled one of his cards this morning and lowered his daily ATM limit. He doesn't need that much cash. If it gets difficult, we can always talk to the lawyer about protective arrangements. Protective arrangements, I repeated. The words tasted rotten. In my country, we call that stealing, Miguel said bluntly. What did Clay say? I asked. He said, well, you're the authorized agent, Mark. As long as we have the right signatures on the POA and he's not demonstrably incompetent, you're fine. Worst case, he gets an attorney, but usually people in a situation don't bother. Too much hassle. I thought of my blue folder in Mark's hands. Power of attorney. We'd signed documents at his kitchen table 3 months after Linda died. It's just for emergencies, he'd said, sliding the pages toward me. If you're in a hospital or something. Standard stuff, Dad. Linda isn't here to say, have someone else look at it first, Richard. Don't just sign because he's your son. So I signed. I'd spent my whole life trying not to be a burden. Turns out I'd been an opportunity. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Miguel's gaze didn't flinch. Because my brother did the same thing to my father. Different country, same story. He helped with the money. After my father died, there was nothing left. Not even enough for the funeral. I got a job here to pay it back. I'll watch these men. He flicked his chin toward the frosted doors. Do the same tricks with better suits. He leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. And because you looked surprised when your car did not work. A man should know when someone kicks the ground from under his feet. Somewhere inside, a steel door swung shut with a quiet, final click. I sat there for a moment, staring through the glass at the miniature city. Horns honked 4 floors below, faint and distant. A man on a bicycle wove between cars, a black backpack slung over one shoulder. In my mind, scenes began unspooling, not in order but in sharp, jagged pieces. Mark at 16, standing in the kitchen with a crumpled brochure in his hand. Dad, the trip's only $600. Everyone's going. They're going to Paris and London. I'll never get another chance like this. Linda, biting her lip, looking at me over his shoulder. We had $418 in the checking account until payday. The savings account had exactly $2,000, and that was earmarked for the brake job on the car and the dentist. I'll pick up some overtime, I told her that night, in bed, whispering in the dark. He worked so hard at school. We'll find a way. We did. I took 6 extra Saturday shifts at the freight yard. Mark went to Europe. Mark at 21, calling from college, his voice tight. The bursar's office says I can't register next semester unless we pay the remaining balance. It's like $9,000, Dad. They're being totally unreasonable. $9,000. I drained our IRA for that one, accepting the penalty fee and Linda's worried face in exchange for the light in Mark's eyes at graduation 3 years later. Mark at 32, sitting at our dining room table, head in his hands. The startup just needs a bridge, Dad. The investors are lined up. We just have to get through the next few months. 40,000 would get us there. It's not like it's a gift, it's an investment. You'll get it back tenfold. Tenfold never materialized. The company folded 18 months later. The 40,000 became one of those things. The numbers added up in my head like a column on a ledger. 600 here, 9,000 there, 40,000 later. I stopped counting when I passed 100,000. The money was gone, but the pattern remained. Now, here we were. My son, talking about me as a line item, as a problem to be streamlined, as a wallet to be optimized. You're sure you heard all that correctly? I asked Miguel, though I already knew the answer. His details were too precise. I don't have a perfect memory, he said. But they were not careful with their words. He hesitated. There is one more thing. Of course there was. Go on. They talked about guardianship, he said carefully. Mr. Clay said, the elder law attorney I work with can fast-track a guardianship petition if your father starts pushing back. You said he's been misplacing things, repeating stories. Miguel's eyes met mine. Your son laughed and said, yeah, he tells me about my own childhood like I wasn't there. And he lost his glasses twice last month. We can make that work, right? I reached up and touched the glasses on my face like I needed to confirm they still existed. I had lost them once last month. Left them at the pharmacy counter after arguing with the cashier about a mysterious $35 processing fee on my prescription. I'd walked back, retrieved them, joked about getting old. A lost pair of glasses, repurposed as Exhibit A in a case for declaring me incompetent. Do you have any proof? I asked quietly. Anything besides your word? Miguel shook his head. I'm just a gardener. Nobody listens to me. But I can tell someone if you want. I can write it down. A statement. I can swear on it. He spread his hands, palms up, soil and all. In my country we have a saying, he added. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. I looked at this man, this stranger in green overalls who took more care wiping dust from leaves than my own son took with the truth. The world tilted just a little. Would you be willing to tell a lawyer what you heard? I asked. His answer came without the slightest pause. Yes. When I walked back to the seating area, my body moved strangely, as if it belonged to someone else. I sat down with the empty blueberry muffin wrapper in front of me and pretended to read a brochure about retirement strategies. Sophia looked up from her computer. Mr. Dawson, Mr. Clay will be ready for you in just a few minutes, okay? Take your time, I said, and even managed a smile. My voice sounded calm in my own ears. Curious thing, how the surface holds steady while entire continents shift underneath. In my pocket, my useless blue visa pressed against my leg like a stone. I checked the wall clock above the reception desk, point 11:21. In those 21 minutes, my son had deleted my access to my own money, authorized a $75,000 transfer, and discussed the best way to legally classify me as a confused old man if I objected. Protective arrangements, they called it. Like bubble wrap. Someone opened the frosted doors. A petite woman with straight black hair and a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent stepped out, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Mr. Dawson, she called. I stood automatically, my muscles obeying habits older than any of this. Yes. Hi, I'm Emily, Mr. Clay's assistant. She gave a professional smile. There's been a slight delay with the documents, so we're just having Mark sign a few things first. We'll bring you in shortly to go over the overall plan. In the meantime, can I get you anything? Another coffee? Water? I'm fine, I said. I've had enough. If you need a restroom, it's just down that hallway on the left, she added, the way people do with old men, like we're prone to accidents. We won't be long. I'll be right here, I said. She disappeared back through the doors. I sat down again. In front of me, on the low table, lay another shiny brochure. Legacy planning, ensuring your values live on. A smiling stock photo, grandfather bounced a grinning child on his knee. I took my phone out, thumb hovering over Mark's name. For a moment, I imagined storming into that office, ripping the papers off the table, shouting something dramatic about betrayal and theft. It would feel good for about 30 seconds. Then what? They'd shake their heads about the emotional old man and usher me into another room, give me a cup of tea, talk in soothing tones about misunderstandings and stress. No, storming in now would mean playing on their turf, by their rules, at a table where they'd already stacked the deck. I looked toward the window. Miguel was back by the palms, misting the leaves like nothing had happened. When our eyes met, he gave me the smallest of nods. Not encouragement, recognition. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and sat very still. If Mark wanted me to sit in the lobby while he rearranged my life, then that is exactly what I would do for now. I would sit, and I would listen, and I would smile at the right places. I would let him think the ground was steady under his feet, and then I would start digging. At 11:37, the frosted glass door opened again. This time it was Mark. His hair was a little mussed, like he'd been running his hand through it. He looked excited, the way he used to look when he came home with a good grade. "Dad," he said, all warmth. "Sorry for the wait. Come on back, okay? We're all set. Clay's got everything ready to go over with you." I stood up, glancing once at the clock, then at Miguel. "Take your time," I told my son, echoing my own words from earlier. "I'm not going anywhere." He didn't hear the layers under that sentence. Why would he? He never looked at the trunk, only the branches heavy with fruit. I followed him through the glass doors into the interior of Harris & Cole's offices. Behind me, in the lobby, a gardener picked up his spray bottle and went back to work, but the ground had already started to shift. By the time I walked out of that building an hour later, the decision would already be taking shape, quiet and sharp, like a blade cooling in water. He thought canceling my credit card was the end of something. It was actually the beginning. The funny thing about betrayal is how ordinary the rest of the day looks. When I finally stepped back out onto the sidewalk in front of Harris & Cole, the sky was a washed-out blue. The traffic light at the corner was blinking its usual red-yellow-green cycle, and someone was arguing into a Bluetooth headset about a conference call. My son clapped me on the shoulder, told me I'd done great, and then jogged off toward a parking garage, shouting something about circling back on Sunday to walk through the new setup. I nodded like an obedient client. Inside that glass building, I had sat in a too-soft chair across from a man named Clay in a Navy suit, while he walked me through charts on a giant monitor, pie graphs, line graphs, projections in neat ascending lines. My name was at the top of every screen, Richard E. Dawson, followed by words like portfolio allocation and retirement alternatives. "We're simplifying," Clay had said in that mild, expensive voice. "Consolidating. It's all about making things seamless for you, Richard. Less for you to worry about." Mark had chimed in, smiling. "Dad hates worrying about this stuff." "Don't you, Dad?" I'd smile back, the way you do when your kid shows you a magic trick you already know the secret to. "I like things simple," I'd said, "as long as they're honest." They'd taken that as a joke. Both men chuckled. Clay had slid a pen and a stack of papers across the table. "These are just acknowledgments of the new management structure," he'd explained. "Nothing that changes your day-to-day experience. We've already gone over all the terms with Mark." Of course they had. I'd taken my time. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but I can still read 10-point font. There it was in black and white. References to an irrevocable management authorization, new beneficiary designations in coordination with existing estate planning documents, and a line about allocating liquidity to meet near-term assisted living obligations. "Why does this say irrevocable?" I'd asked, tapping the word. Clay had smiled again, unbothered. "It's just legal language that means we're committing to a management strategy. We can always adjust within the framework, of course." My hand had looked steady as I signed only the 2 documents that kept my accounts in my name and refused to sign the others. I'd pushed those back across the desk. "Those require further review," I'd said. "By my attorney." There had been a flicker then. Not on Clay's face. It was trained, but in Mark's eyes. Just a tiny spark of annoyance that his old man had stepped off script. "Dad," We don't need to drag some lawyer into this, he'd begun, the friendly tone losing a degree of warmth. I didn't drag anyone, I'd replied. I mentioned him. That's free. And then the meeting was over. Clay's assistant printed me a summary packet in a branded folder. Mark kissed my cheek in the lobby and said, "Love you, Dad. We'll talk through everything this weekend." I'm looking forward to it, I'd said. I meant something different than he did. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. I sat by the window, folder on my lap, watching the city slide by. Strip malls, laundromats, a pawn shop with We Buy Gold in the window, an old diner I used to take Linda to on Tuesdays when they had the meatloaf special. I got off 2 blocks early, at the corner of Maple and 7th, for no other reason than to walk. I needed to feel my feet on the pavement, to remind myself that I still inhabited a body, that I had weight. My apartment smelled faintly of fried onions and air freshener when I opened the door. Mrs. Patel in 3C likes to cook with every spice known to man, and the scent migrates through pipes and vents like a friendly ghost. I set the Harrison coal folder on the kitchen table, next to the salt shaker and the sugar bowl with a chipped lid. The silence in the place felt heavier than usual. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. "Let's see what we're really dealing with." I made coffee first. Proper coffee in the scratched-up drip machine Linda and I bought at Sears in 1999. Measure, pour, click. The sound of water heating and dripping through grounds was familiar enough to slow my pulse. Then I pulled the blue folder from my hall closet, not the Harrison Cole folder, the other one, the one that had lived on the top shelf for the last 2 years, between an old photo album and a shoebox full of birthday cards. The blue folder with my life inside it. I carried both folders back to the dining table, set them side by side, and sat down. The chair creaked under my weight. On the left, my records. Bank statements, account numbers, the HUD settlement sheet from the sale of the house dated September 30th, 2021, with the big number $742,000.43, circled in Linda's old blue pen. A note in my handwriting beneath it. Less $12,000 moving plus $80,000 condo Reno plus $25,000 for Mark loan, January 2022. On the right, the nice glossy printouts from Clay. Portfolio breakdowns, projections, language about risk tolerance and expected longevity. I started reading. 3 pages and my chest tightened in a very specific way that had nothing to do with clogged arteries. It had to do with subtraction. The next morning, April 18th, I went to the bank. I still bank where I always have. First Valley Credit Union, branch on Larchmont. The logo has changed 3 times in 20 years, but the carpet stains near the door are the same. I arrived at 9:07 a.m., 3 minutes after they opened. The place was almost empty. A young woman in a navy dress and name tag that said Tanya stood behind the counter, straightening a stack of deposit slips. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson," she said when she saw me. "I've been coming in once a month to deposit my pension check since before she was hired. How are you doing today?" "I've had better days," I said. "Is Maria in?" Maria has been the branch manager for as long as I can remember. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, sensible shoes. She's the one who talked me into opening the CD that financed Mark's first car. "She is," Tanya said. "I think she's free right now. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell her it's about potential fraud on my account," I said. "That should bump me up." Tanya's eyebrows ticked up 0.5 millimeter. "One moment." She disappeared into the offices behind the counter. 30 seconds later, Maria herself came out, smoothing her blazer. "Richard," she said, coming around the counter with her hand out. "You okay?" "That's what I'm here to find out," I said. "Got a minute?" "For you?" "Always." She gestured toward a row of glass-walled cubicles. "Come on back." Her office had the usual bank manager decor. 2 guest chairs facing a desk with dual monitors, a framed picture of her family, a fake ficus in the corner, certificates on the wall that said nothing useful beyond how long she'd been doing this. She closed the door behind us. "All right," she said, sitting down. "Tell me what's going on." I slid my debit card across the desk. "I want a complete printout of every transaction on my checking and savings accounts for the past 12 months. And on the linked Visa account. All of it." Her eyebrows rose. "That's a lot of paper, Richard. Anything specific you're looking for?" "Yes," I said. "I just don't know what it is yet." She studied my face for a beat, then nodded and turned to her keyboard. Fingers flew. She's been doing this longer than most of her tellers have been alive. You authorized your son as a joint account holder last year, she said, eyes on the screen. Is this about him? It's about whether I was an idiot, I said. Spoiler alert. The answer is probably yes. She gave a sympathetic little snort. Okay, she said. Let's start with the visa. Her screen reflected in the glass frame of the family photo behind her. I couldn't read the details, just the scrolling lines, but I could see the length. How long would it take someone to cancel that card? I asked. If they had joint access. Not long. Her mouth flattened into a line. But they'd normally call us. Or do it online if they have logged in access. She clicked. The card was canceled yesterday morning at 9:03 a.m. online request. Confirmed by secondary account holder Mark Dawson. Before we even went to the meeting, I said quietly. Was there an issue with the card? She asked. It declined in a lobby when I tried to buy a bottle of water, I said. Which was humiliating. Maria winced. I'm sorry. I'm more sorry about what I think it means, I said. Can you print the last year's statements for that card? Of course. She typed a few more commands, then hit print. The machine behind her began spitting out pages. Checking and savings too? I added. Year to date. And anything that looks like a wire transfer out of any of those accounts. Now you're making me nervous, she said, but there was no humor in it. Good, I replied. Maybe we could be nervous together. She printed everything. The pile of paper grew until it was about an inch thick. She brought it around and laid it on the desk in front of me. Do you want to step out while you look? She asked. No, I said. Stay. You'll recognize trouble faster than I will. We started with the visa. Groceries. Gas. Pharmacy. A few Amazon charges that I recognized. A book about heart health, a replacement coffee maker filter, a set of new towels I splurged on last November. Nothing unusual. Then, in January, a few charges I didn't recognize. Not large. $89.99 for some software subscription, $59.99 here, $129 there. All from companies with vague names like Global Digital Services and Premium Media Solutions. What's this? I asked. Maria leaned over, adjusted her glasses. Could be anything. Sometimes those are streaming services, sometimes something else. You didn't sign up for any new subscriptions? No, I said. I cancel free trials before they even start. Someone with your car number could have, she murmured. But those aren't huge. We could dispute them. Let's keep going. We moved to checking. There it was. Line after line. Starting last June. June 15th, 2022. Online transfer to EXT ACCT, $2,000. July 15th, 2022. Online transfer to EXT ACCT, $2,000. August 15th, 2022. Online transfer to EXT ACCT, $2,000. Same amount, same time every month. What external account? I asked, voice tight. She clicked something on her screen. Ending in 4421, she said. Account holder name, Mark Dawson. I'd known he was moving some money to help with liquidity for his business. I had not known it was that regular, that automatic, or that large. $2,000 a month. For 10 months. $20,000. Okay, I said through my teeth. What else? We scanned further down. There were my usual bills. Rent $1,850 on the first of each month. Utilities, the phone bill, the internet. And then, 6 weeks ago, March 3rd, 2023, online transfer, $15,000. EXT ACCT 4421. Was that you? Maria asked. No, I said. I don't move 5-digit amounts from my kitchen table. It was authorized with your online login, she said. And that's a joint login if you've given him access. I gave him the password once, I said, remembering. When we were setting up automatic payments on the electric bill, he said he needed to tweak something. She exhaled slowly. Richard, we kept going. My eyes burned. For more large transfers to account ending 4421. 03/29/2023, $10,000. 04/01/2023, $5,000. 04/10/2023, $12,500. And then, yesterday, the big one. April 17th, 2023. Wire transfer, $75,000. Brookside Holdings, LLC. There it was. The Brookside deposit Miguel had mentioned. $75,000. Wired at 10:07 a.m. while I was riding in my son's Tesla, thinking we were going to talk about safer investments. Jesus, I muttered. Maria's jaw tightened. We're not supposed to say Jesus in the bank, she said, trying for lightness and failing. But I think he'd understand this one. How much is left? I asked. She scrolled. In your savings, after that wire? About $210,000, she said. Checking has just under 9. Your CD is still intact. That's another 40. IRA is separate. You need to talk to our investment department. I did rough math in my head. House sale plus existing savings had put us near $800,000 total, excluding the IRA. Take out what I'd known about. The $15,000 I'd given Mark explicitly over the last 2 years, the apartment renovations, a new used car for myself. And we should have been in the low sixes easily, not 300-something. How many total transfers to his account, including the small ones? I asked. Maria printed another sheet. The paper came out with a neatly ordered list. In the last 12 months, she said. Looks like wait. She counted with her finger. Regular 2,000 transfers from June through March, that's 10. Plus the 15K in March, plus the 10K at the end of March, plus 5K April 1st, plus 12.5 on the 10th. That's, she grabbed a calculator. 20 grand in the automatic ones, plus 15 plus 10 plus 5 plus 12.5, 42.5. Total $62,500 transferred to his account in a year. $62,500. On top of the $40,000 investment from a decade ago, and the college and the Euro-Pet trip, and the thousands in smaller checks over the years. In Brookside, I said, don't forget the 75. In Brookside, she nodded. But that's to a corporate account. Still a red flag, given the context. So we're at $137,500, I said. Give or take. Maria's lips pressed into a thin line. Richard, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Were you aware of all these transfers? Did you authorize them mentally, even if he physically did them? No, I said. I knew about the first 5 or 6. Early last year, there was a rough patch with his business. I told him I'd help with a couple of months. After that, I shook my head. I didn't know about the rest. She leaned back in her chair, hands folded. Do you feel pressure by your son? She asked. Does he ever threaten to withhold care or access if you don't give him money? He threatens to organize my life, I said bitterly, which, it turns out, is much the same thing. She went quiet for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a laminated sheet. I'm going to give you some information, she said. What your son is doing, if it's without your full consent, falls under what the state calls financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I know you don't feel vulnerable, but the law has its own definitions. We're required to report suspected cases. She slid the sheet across the desk. The header read, Protecting Seniors from Financial Abuse. If you suspect you're a victim, contact. There is a phone number for Adult Protective Services, one for the State Attorney General's Elder Fraud Division, and a list of local elder law attorneys. I'm not saying your son is a criminal mastermind, Maria said, but these patterns are concerning, especially the guardianship talk you mentioned. I didn't mention it, I said. You did. She frowned. No, I held up a hand. Sorry. Bad attempt at a joke. I'm not myself today. You're more yourself than I've seen in a while, she said gently. And that's a good thing. We went over options. She suggested placing an immediate hold on any new transfers over a certain amount, setting alerts for all large transactions, and requiring my physical signature for future wires. Can we remove Mark as a joint account holder? I asked. Yes, she said, but we have to do it carefully. If there's an ongoing abuse case, investigators sometimes prefer to watch patterns instead of cutting them off immediately. However, she glanced at me. You also have the right to protect yourself now. Do it, I said. Remove him. Okay. She typed a few commands. Done. Effective as of 9:43 a.m., April 18th. The timestamp felt important, like drawing a line on the floor and saying, "Here, this is where it changed." She printed confirmation documents and had me sign them in 3 places. The pen felt heavy in my hand. "Next," I said, sliding the laminated sheet about elder abuse closer. "I need a good elder law attorney, not one of the names my son's wealth manager would recommend." Maria smiled without humor. "I might know someone. Remember Tom Jenkins? Used to come in here, big guy, gray beard, always arguing with me about CD rates." I did. "He's a lawyer?" "Retired," she said, "but his son took over his practice. Jenkins and Ward. They do estate planning and elder law. And Tom still consults. I can't officially endorse anyone, but if I were in your shoes, I'd start there." She scribbled a number on the back of one of her business cards and slid it across. "Thanks," I said. "Maria, one more thing. When Mark calls the bank, and he will, what can he see? What can he do?" She looked me straight in the eye. "He's been removed from the accounts," she said slowly. "So legally, he has no standing. He can no longer view balances or initiate transactions. If he calls, we'll tell him to talk to you. And if he gets insistent, we'll refer him to our fraud department." I took a breath that felt a little deeper than the others. "Good," I said. "Let him be surprised for a change." I left the bank with a plastic folder full of printed statements and Maria's card in my pocket. The day was warming up. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and exhaust. Back home, I spread the papers out on my dining table. They formed little white rows of my life, each line a tiny slice of decision. Rent, utility, pharmacy, transfer to Mark, transfer to Mark, transfer to Brookside. The phone sat beside the pile, Maria's scribbled number next to it. I picked up the phone and dialed Jenkins and Ward. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "Jenkins and Ward, attorneys at law. How can I direct your call?" "I'd like to make an appointment about an elder financial issue," I said. "Name's Richard Dawson." Maria at First Valley suggested I call. "Of course, Mr. Dawson," she said. "We handle a lot of those matters. Are you comfortable coming into the office, or would you prefer a phone consultation?" "In person," I said. "I've had enough phone calls about my money for one lifetime." She laughed lightly, then stopped when I didn't join. "Our first availability is tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Mr. Ward," she said. "Does that work for you?" "Yes," I said. "It does." She took my information and gave me the address. 312 West Monroe, 3rd floor. I wrote it down on a sticky note and stuck it to the edge of the blue folder. After I hung up, the apartment felt smaller. I walked into the living room, looked at the framed pictures on the wall. Linda, holding a tray of Christmas cookies, powdered sugar on her nose. Mark at 8, showing off a science fair ribbon. Mark at 18 in a cap and gown, my arm around his shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. "He's still your son," Linda would have said if she were here. "He's not just what he does." She wasn't here. He was doing what he was doing. And I was still his father, but I wasn't just that. I was also a man with choices to make. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. I'd put it on without realizing. I poured hot water over a tea bag in a chipped mug, the one with a faded picture of a freight train on it, and carried it back to the table. On top of the bank statements, I placed the Harrison Cole folder. On top of that, I placed a blank sheet of paper and wrote, in slow, careful letters, "Questions for lawyer." Under it, I started a list. Can he be charged with financial exploitation? How do I revoke the power of attorney? Can I undo any of the transfers to his account? Can I stop the Brookside deposit or at least freeze it? How do I change my will/trust so he no longer controls anything? What happens if he tries to file for guardianship? The list kept growing. Can Miguel's testimony help? Should I contact Adult Protective Services or let the lawyer do it? How do I make sure I can still pay my own rent and bills during all this? By the time I reached number 12, my hand cramped. I shook it out and stared at the page. My whole life, I'd solved problems with elbow grease and patience. A leaky pipe? You tighten it. A car that won't start? You check the battery, the spark plugs, the fuel. You don't call a lawyer. But this wasn't a pipe or a car. This was trust, rewritten as fine print. On the corner of the table, my cell phone buzzed. A new text from Mark. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you didn't find today too overwhelming. Remember, this is all for your security. Love you." I stared at the words, love you, until they blurred. Then I did something I'd never done before. I didn't respond. The next day, I wore the same navy slacks and white shirt to Jenkins and Ward that I'd worn to Harrison Cole. Same polished shoes. Different spine. The office was on the third floor of an older building with less glass and more brick. The waiting area had comfortable chairs that looked lived in and a coffee machine that was clearly older than some of the clients. The magazines on the table were dog-eared. No one offered me a muffin. I took that as a good sign. Mr. Dawson, a young woman in a gray cardigan, called. I'm Lily, Mr. Ward's paralegal. Come on back. Mr. Ward turned out to be early 40s, hairline already retreating, with a face that looked like it had spent a lot of time saying, I'm sorry you're going through this, and meaning it. He shook my hand. His grip was firm, not crushing. So, he said after we sat down, Maria gave me a quick heads up. Why don't you tell me, in your own words, what's happening? So I did. I told him about the canceled car in the lobby, about the gardener, Miguel, and what he'd overheard, about the wire to Brookside, the transfers to Mark's account, the guardianship talk, the regular drip of money over the last year. I slid across the bank statements, the Harris and Cole folder, and my list of questions. He listened without interrupting much, just occasional clarifying questions. At one point, he flipped through the Harris and Cole documents and whistled softly when he reached the irrevocable management authorization. Did you sign this one? He asked. No, I said. Clay seemed surprised. Good, he said. Very good. I told him about the power of attorney we'd signed at Mark's kitchen table. I have a copy somewhere, I said. Pretty sure Mark has the original. We can pull one from the county if it was filed properly, Ward said. What date, roughly? Early 2022. I said. February, maybe, after my wife died. He nodded. That tracks. And the guardianship talk? I asked. Can they really do that? Take me to court and argue I should be under his control? They could try, he said. But it's not as simple as filling out a form. The court has to see that you're incapacitated, unable to manage your own affairs. Just misplacing your glasses and repeating stories doesn't cut it. And you're clearly competent enough to come here, gather records, and seek legal advice. Good, I said, because I'd hate to be declared incompetent on a technicality. Ward leaned back, steepling his fingers. Mr. Dawson, he said, what your son is doing is, unfortunately, very common. We call it the good kid problem. The child everyone trusts is the one with the keys to the castle. Usually it creeps up slowly, just like this. A few transfers, a few temporary loans, a little restructuring, and suddenly the parent's assets are gone. These aren't loans, I said. He never treats them as something to be repaid. There is due somehow. Ward nodded. We have a few tools. 1. We immediately revoke the power of attorney. 2. We send letters to any institutions involved, Harris and Cole, Brookside, informing them that there is a dispute and that we believe there may be financial exploitation. That often gets things frozen long enough to investigate. 3. We help you file a report with Adult Protective Services. They may or may not open a case, but it creates a paper trail. And my son? I asked. What happens to him? That depends on how far you want to take this, he said frankly. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a crime. At the low end, he might face civil penalties, repayment, loss of access. At the high end, if the DA decides to pursue it and the evidence is strong, he could be looking at charges. Sometimes we're able to resolve it without going that far, through negotiated restitution and revised estate plans. I looked down at my hands. I don't want him in jail, I said slowly. I just don't want to be robbed. And I don't want him having the power to put me in a place like Brookside because it's efficient. That's reasonable, Ward said. Our job is to protect you. If, during that process, there are consequences for him, that's on him. I thought of Miguel wiping leaves, the axe and the tree. I have a witness, I said. The gardener at Harris and Cole. He heard a lot of what Mark and Clay were saying. Ward's eyes brightened a little. Excellent. We'll want a written statement from him as soon as possible. Names, dates, exact wording as best he can recall. He offered, I said. Said he'd swear on it. Good man, Ward murmured. We'll also look into Harris and Cole's practices. If Clay was knowingly facilitating this, he's got his own problems. He took out a legal pad and started outlining steps. Here's what I propose, he said. Today, you sign a document revoking the power of attorney effective immediately. We'll send notice to your son and to any institutions we know are relying on it. We'll also draft a letter to Brookside demanding a hold on that $75,000 deposit pending investigation of possible financial exploitation. In parallel, we'll start revising your estate plan. Estate plan? I echoed. Your will, he said. And, if you're open to it, a trust that gives you more control while you're alive and less to certain parties when you're not. We can talk details after we put out the fire. It was a lot of paper again, but this time, the pen in my hand felt like a tool, not a weapon pointed in the wrong direction. I signed a revocation of power of attorney. The words at the top of the page felt like a lifeline. I, Richard E. Dawson, hereby revoke any and all powers of attorney previously granted to Mark A. Dawson. Ward added his own signature as witness and notarized it on the spot. You understand, he said. Your son is going to be very unhappy about this. Understand, I said. He can be unhappy in his own house, with his own bank accounts. Ward smiled just a little. That's the spirit, he said. As I left, Lily handed me a thick envelope. These are your copies, she said. And here's my card. If your son shows up upset or starts making threats, call us. And if you feel in danger, call 911 first, then us. I don't think it'll come to that, I said. But thank you. On my way past the reception desk, I noticed a pamphlet on a side table. The title read, When Family Takes Too Much, a guide to financial boundaries for seniors. I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket, just in case I ever forgot how we got here. On the bus home, I stared out at the passing streets and thought about the phrase Ward had used. The good kid problem. Mark had always been the good kid. No drugs, no arrests. Honor roll, soccer team, decent job. He called on birthdays, brought the grandkids over for Thanksgiving, sent photos from vacations. He also quietly siphoned off my savings, canceled my credit card, and was in the process of trying to park me in a facility like a used car. Two truths. One son. I got off one stop early again. I wanted to walk past Harrison Cole. From a sidewalk, the building looked the same as it had 2 days ago. Sleek, reflective, anonymous. People in suits walked in and out, checking their phones. Miguel was outside near the planters by the smoking area, just where he'd said he'd been. He was dumping a bucket of water into a drain, his green overalls damp at the knees. I crossed the street and walked up. Senor Dawson, he said when he saw me. You came back. Yes, I said, and I'm glad you told me what you did. I've been to the bank, and to a lawyer. He set the bucket down and wiped his hands. Good. I need you to write down what you heard, I said. Names, dates, words. My lawyer wants a statement. He says it could make a big difference. Miguel nodded immediately. I can do that. I pulled a small spiral notebook and a pen from my jacket pocket. Old habit. I like to write things down. I handed them to him. Take your time, I said. Do it on your break. Or a home. However you want. Just make it as detailed as you can. Then call this number. I gave him Ward's card. He looked at it, then at me. You are really going to fight him, he said. Not a question. I am, I said. I spent my whole life being a good father. I'm not going to spend what's left being a convenient victim. Miguel's mouth curved into something like a smile. Bueno, he said. The axe has been swinging a long time. Maybe now the tree pushes back. I left him there with the notebook and the lawyer's card and walked home. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket as I went. Once with a new text from Mark. Dad, you didn't pick up when I called. Everything okay? Got some great news Brookside. And once with a voicemail notification from an unknown number. It was Brookside, no doubt. Or Harrison Cole. Or some other nice, polite voice letting me know my financial life was being reorganized for my comfort and peace of mind. I didn't answer either of them. I kept walking, one steady step after another, toward my little apartment with the chipped mug and the old coffee maker, my hands full of papers that finally told the truth. The next time my son tried to streamline me, he was going to find there was more resistance than he'd budgeted for. For a week, my son behaved like nothing had changed. He texted. He called. He left cheerful voicemails that sounded like they'd been copy-pasted from a handbook called How to Soothe a Difficult Parent While You Loot Him. Hey, Dad, tried you earlier. Just wanted to check how you're feeling after the meeting. Big changes, I know, but you'll thank me later. Love you. Quick reminder, we should talk through the Brookside to Moline. They've got limited spots, and we don't want to lose your deposit. Mia's soccer game this weekend. You should come if you're feeling up to it. We can chat about finances after, low-key. I didn't answer any of them. It's amazing how much power silence has when you've spent your life filling it. On Thursday, Ward called. 3 updates, he said. 1. Brookside has frozen the $75,000. My letter plus a call from Adult Protective Services got their attention. Good, I said, stirring sugar into my morning coffee. Nice to know they can read. 2. Harris & Cole has taken your concerns seriously and placed your accounts in what they call administrative hold, pending clarification of the power of attorney situation, Ward went on. Translation, Clay's nervous. And 3, I asked. 3 is that your son left me a very angry voicemail, Ward said calmly. He thinks you've been manipulated into turning on him. He threatened to file for guardianship if you keep making irrational decisions. I took a sip of coffee and burned my tongue. What did you tell him? That any further threats should be made in writing, Ward said, and that if he files for guardianship, he will find himself facing counterclaims of financial exploitation with a nice fat file of bank statements and at least one witness ready to testify. I said, that must have gone over well. He hung up, Ward said dryly. But here's the important part. I suggested we invite him to a meeting with you present to clear up misunderstandings. Somewhere neutral but relevant. You mean Harris & Cole? I said. Exactly, Ward said. They've agreed to host. Clay will be there. A representative from Brookside joining by video. I've also asked Maria from First Vallejo attend as your banking witness. And if your friend the gardener has a statement ready. He will, I said. He takes more care with leaves than most people take with human beings. I trust him. Good, Ward said. Meeting is set for Monday at 11 a.m. same building you went to before. But this time, you're not going in alone. I looked down at my kitchen table. The chipped sugar bowl, the mug with the freight train, the blue folder, slightly fatter now, with legal documents. Linda's old reading glasses lay next to it. The cheap CVS pair I couldn't bring myself to throw away. All right, I said. Monday, 11 a.m. And Richard. Ward added, this is likely to get heated. Your son may say some unpleasant things. Stay calm. Let me do the talking when it comes to law. Your job is to be exactly what you are, coherent, informed, and very clear that you do not consent to what he tried to do. I can manage that, I said. I've been managing my own life for almost 7 decades. Exactly, Ward said. Tommy met that version of his father in a conference room. Monday morning, I dressed slower than usual. Same navy slacks. Same white shirt. This time I added a gray sweater vest Linda had knitted the winter before she died. One of the threads near the hem had frayed. I trimmed it carefully with kitchen scissors. In the bedroom, on top of my dresser, sat Linda's jewelry box. I hadn't opened it in months. My fingers hesitated on the lid, then lifted it. Most of the pieces were costume stuff, plastic beads, tarnished chains. In the small center compartment lay her plain gold wedding band. I picked it up, turned it between my fingers, then slipped it into my pocket. If you were here, I murmured, you'd either slap him or cry. Or both. The kettle screamed in the kitchen. I made toast, ate it standing up, and washed the plate. Left the apartment neat. I don't know why, but I wanted the place to look like someone responsible lived there. Bus at 9:50. Transfer at 10:15. I arrived downtown at 10:35, earlier than necessary, which is how I've approached most things in life. The Harris & Cole building looked the same. Glass gleaming. People hurrying. Lobby plants standing in their tasteful gray pots like sentries. Inside, the air had the same faint coffee and toner smell. The same soft jazz hummed from invisible speakers. The only thing different was me. Sophia looked up as I approached the desk. For a second, I saw recognition in her eyes, then something that might have been guilt. Good morning, Mr. Dawson, she said a little too brightly. You're here for the 11 a.m. meeting with Mr. Clay? Yes, I said. And others. Yes, of course, she said quickly. Mr. Clay is getting the conference room ready. Mr. Ward is already here. Your son is on his way. I'm sure he is, I said. Over by the windows, a familiar set of green overalls moved among the plants. "Miguel," I called. He turned. His face creased into a smile when he saw me. "Senor Dawson," he said, "you look serious." "That's the goal," I said. "You got my lawyer's message?" He nodded and patted his chest pocket. "I wrote everything down. 6 pages. My wife typed it for me, so they can read it easy. I also signed it. Twice, like the lawyer said." "Good," I said. "You may be called into the meeting. Only if you're comfortable." "I am," he said. "My boss, he said it's okay. He hears these men talk too. He says, be careful, but tell the truth." I like this boss of his without ever meeting him. At 10:43, Ward appeared from the hallway. No suit jacket today, just a dark blue shirt and a tie with tiny trains on it. It made me like him more. "Richard," he said, shaking my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone about to get a root canal," I said. Relieved it's finally happening, but not looking forward to the drill. He smiled. "We'll use anesthetic where we can." Behind him, a woman in a gray blazer approached. Late 30s, hair pinned back, a badge clipped to her lapel. APS, with the county logo underneath. "This is Ms. Collins," Ward said. "Adult Protective Services. She's observing today. Just observing for now." "Mr. Dawson," Collins said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "I've reviewed the preliminary report. I'm here to make sure you understand your rights and to see whether any further action is warranted." "Warranted?" I said. Funny word to hear when talking about your own son. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that line before many times. "We see this a lot," she said. "Doesn't make it less wrong." The elevator pinged. Mark stepped out, talking into his phone. "No, I told them we'd sort it out today. Just hold off on any." He saw us and broke off. His smile turned on automatically like a motion sensor lamp. "Dad, you're early," he said, tucking his phone into his pocket. His eyes flicked to Ward, then to Collins, taking their measure. "We got the whole cavalry, huh?" "We have people who work for me," I said. "That's new." He chuckled like that was cute. "Of course they work for you," he said. "We're all on the same team." There was something off in his tone, a strain under the smoothness. I noticed a faint shadow under his eyes, like he hadn't slept much. His shirt was a little wrinkled at the collar. Clay appeared next, from the inner offices. Same navy suit, same practiced expression of concern. "Richard," he said, stepping forward with a hand outstretched. "Good to see you again. I'm sorry for any confusion last week. Hopefully we can clarify everything today." I didn't take his hand. "I'm here to listen," I said. "And so is my lawyer." Clay retracted his hand smoothly, no offense showing on his face. "Of course," he said. "We have the Jefferson Room reserved, if everyone wants to follow me." The Jefferson Room turned out to be a glass-walled conference room overlooking the lobby. Long oak table, 12 leather chairs, a large monitor on one wall, a speakerphone in the center of the table like a small black spaceship. On the far wall, a TV screen flickered to life with a logo, Brookside Residences. Beneath it, the name Karen Hughes appeared with the title Regional Admissions Director. A woman's face popped into view. Late 40s, professionally blonde, wearing a headset. Her background was a tastefully staged home and garden set. Fake bookshelves, a plant, a framed Serenity quote. "Good morning, everyone," she said through the speaker. "Can you hear me okay?" Loud and clear, I thought, like a sales pitch at a funeral. Ward gestured toward the chairs at one end of the table. "Richard, sit here, next to me. Miss Collins, if you'll sit on his other side." Mark chose the seat across from me. Clay sat at the head of the table, near the speakerphone. He had a leather portfolio open in front of him, pen already in hand. Of course he did. Maria from First Valley arrived 2 minutes later, slightly out of breath, clutching a slim briefcase. She gave me a quick smile and squeezed my shoulder as she passed. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "Traffic on Larchmont was a mess." "No problem," Clay said. "Glad you could join us." He was trying to project control. I'd seen that posture on Foreman at the freight yard when OSHA inspectors showed up unannounced. "Okay," Ward said. He flipped open his own legal pad. "Let's get started. I think it will help if we each state why we're here today." "Sure," Mark said, leaning back in his chair with practiced ease. "I can start. I'm here because my father and I engaged Harrison Cole to streamline his finances and make sure he's protected as he gets older. For some reason, he's become anxious about that. I'm hoping we can reassure him and get everyone on the same page. Ward nodded, wrote something down, then looked at Clay. Clay, I'm here to ensure our client's wishes are respected, Clay said smoothly. Richard engaged us for wealth management. Our only goal is to make sure his assets are handled efficiently and in accordance with his goals. Ms. Hughes spoke next through the speaker. Brooks and I is here simply to clarify any misunderstandings about Mr. Dawson's application and deposit, she said. We strive to be a supportive partner in aging with dignity. I almost choked on the phrase. Ward turned to Maria. I'm here because Mr. Dawson's banking patterns changed significantly in the last year, she said, and because there are concerns about possible financial exploitation by a joint account holder. Mark shifted in his chair. And Ms. Collins? Ward prompted. I'm here as a representative of Adult Protective Services, she said. Our office received a report from First Valley Credit Union regarding irregular transactions and potential coercion. I'm here to listen and determine if further action is needed. Ward nodded, then glanced at me. I'm here, I said, because my son canceled my credit card while I was sitting out there in the lobby, and because the gardener told me what he heard. Silence fluttered across the table like a startled bird. Mark laughed uneasily. Dad, come on, let's be serious. I'm being serious, I said. That's exactly why I'm here. That was the moment I realized something was being done to me, not for me. Ward cleared his throat. I'm here, he said, to represent Mr. Dawson's interests. Those interests currently include revoking any power of attorney previously granted to his son, canceling any unauthorized transfers or commitments, and exploring remedies for what appears, on the face of it, to be financial exploitation. Clay's jaw flexed twice before he spoke. Let's not use loaded terms until we know all the facts, he said. This may simply be a miscommunication. Great, Ward said. Then let's communicate. He pulled a manila folder from his briefcase and slid a series of pages across the table toward Clay and Mark. These are Mr. Dawson's bank statements for the past 12 months, he said. As you can see, there are recurring transfers of $2,000 a month to an account ending in 4421, belonging to Mark Dawson. Then several larger transfers, $15,000, $10,000, $5,000, $12.5, over the last 6 weeks. Total of $62,500 to Mark, not including prior loans and gifts. Mark leaned forward, lips tightening. Those weren't unauthorized, he said. My dad agreed to help with some short-term cash flow for my business. We talked about it. We talked about helping for a couple of months, I said quietly. Not 10, and not with amounts I didn't even know about. Mark waved a hand. We might not have discussed every individual transfer, but you knew the general idea. You told me, if I have it, I'll help. I did, I said. I didn't say, help yourself while I'm not looking. Clay was scanning the statements, pen tapping softly on the table. And then, Ward went on, we have a $75,000 wire from Mr. Dawson's savings to Brookside Holdings LLC, initiated at 10:07 a.m. on April 17th, while Mr. Dawson was en route to this very building. No record of his direct approval, only his agent. He turned his gaze to Ms. Hughes on the screen. Ms. Hughes, does Brookside routinely accept large deposits for admissions without speaking directly to the person whose money is being used? She shifted in her chair, the headset cord twitching. In many cases, she said, adult children handle those details on behalf of their parents. We rely on the documentation provided, powers of attorney, medical recommendations. He wasn't sick, I cut in. He wasn't in the hospital. He was sitting in the passenger seat, right next to the man who authorized $75,000 of his money like it was pocket change. I understand your frustration, Mr. Dawson, she said in that placating tone customer service reps use when you're angry about the wrong color toaster. Our process has already worked for him, Ward said. Your deposit is now frozen pending review. Let's focus on how it got there in the first place. He turned back to Clay. You accepted instructions to restructure Mr. Dawson's finances based on a power of attorney you never confirmed with the principal, Ward said. You didn't speak to him alone. You relied entirely on his son's representations. Then you moved forward with planning to relocate him to an assisted living facility he hadn't even agreed to visit. Clay's smoothness cracked a millimeter. We had an initial meeting with Richard, he said. We discussed goals. He expressed trust in his son and agreed that Mark would handle most of the details. He expressed grief, I said. My wife had been dead less than a year. My son suggested using a professional so I wouldn't have to worry. That's what I agreed to. I did not agree to be quietly shipped off and stripped of access to my own money. Clay glanced at Mark, then at Ms. Collins, then back at Ward. If there were misunderstandings, he said, we're happy to adjust course. But again, let's be careful with the word exploitation. Ms. Collins flipped open a small spiral notebook. In our work, she said, we define exploitation as the illegal or improper use of an adult's funds or resources for another's profit or advantage. One of the red flags is significant transfers to a caregiver or family member that the adult doesn't fully understand. She looked at Mark. Mr. Dawson, can you explain why over $60,000 was moved into your personal account in 12 months when your father's stated monthly expenses are under $2,000? Mark leaned forward, bracing his elbows on the table. Yes, he said. I can. My father asked me to handle his bills. I did. I fronted costs sometimes when his pension timing didn't line up. We decided it was easier to consolidate some of his money with mine so I could pay things efficiently. The line items on those statements don't tell the whole story. What is the whole story? I asked. He gave me a look like I just walked in halfway through a movie. The whole story is that I've been carrying most of the load, he said. Your health, your groceries, your rides to appointments, your prescriptions. Mom's hospice bills. Do you think any of that was free? I had to juggle business expenses, the kids' tuition, the mortgage. Oh, here we go, I muttered. The kids' private school. I didn't realize that counted as my expense. It's all the same pot, Daddy snapped. Family money. Funny how often that phrase means money that isn't yours but that you feel entitled to, I said. Ward cleared his throat. Regardless, he said, Mr. Dawson has revoked the power of attorney. Any authority you had to act on his behalf is now gone. Mark's nostrils flared. He doesn't understand what he's doing, he said. He's been off lately. Paranoid. Forgetful. He thinks people at the grocery store are trying to cheat him when they misscan something. He's not competent to make these decisions. I felt heat in my chest like someone had lit a match. You think being upset about being overcharged makes me incompetent? I asked. Linda used to march back into stores if they shorted us 10 cents. Mark's lips tightened. He's been repeating the same stories, he went on, looking at Ms. Collins. Losing things. Misplacing his keys, his glasses. He doesn't remember conversations we've had about these transfers. That's not why you canceled his card, a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Miguel stood there, hat twisted in his hands, eyes steady. His green overalls looked out of place against the polished oak and glass. Clay half rose. Sir, this is a private meeting. Ward held up a hand. He's here at my request. This is Miguel Alvarez. He works maintenance in this building. He has a signed statement regarding a conversation between Mark and you, Mr. Clay, on April 17th on the balcony outside this floor. Clay's face went very still. I don't see how, he began. This is exactly how, Ward said. Miguel, would you please come in and sit? Miguel stepped in gingerly and took the chair at the far end of the table. He placed a few stapled pages in front of him. You're sure you're comfortable doing this? Ward asked quietly. Miguel nodded. Yes. Ward looked around the table. Unless anyone objects? Mark threw up his hands. Oh, come on. We're taking the word of the janitor over. Gardner, Miguel corrected softly. I felt something like pride flicker in my chest. Ms. Collins spoke. Adult Protective Services welcomes statements from any witnesses, regardless of occupation, she said. Please proceed, Mr. Alvarez. Miguel's hand shook slightly as he lifted the pages, but his voice, when he read, was clear. He recounted that Monday morning in more detail than he had for me by the window, the time, the weather, his route watering the planters. He described the balcony, the ashtray, the overheard jokes. He quoted Mark, if we move him into Brookside be fall, that frees up the apartment and gives us more to work with. No more random Amazon orders or charity checks, either. He quoted Clay, "Between the sale and the managed accounts, you're sitting on about 1.1 million. He quoted Mark again, "The guy's got no real expenses. His rent is under $2,000. Meanwhile, I'm covering private school, the Audi lease, the mortgage for $1,800 a month, man." I watched Mark's face as phrases he thought had evaporated into the air came back to haunt him, line by line. A flush crept up from his collarbone to his ears. And then Miguel continued, eyes flicking to his paper. Mr. Clay asked if there might be pushback from the father. Mark said, and I wrote this down that same day, not if he doesn't know the details. "I've already canceled one of his cards this morning and lowered his daily ATM limit. He doesn't need that much cash. If it gets difficult, we can always talk to the lawyer about protective arrangements." You could have heard a velvet-covered pin drop. Clay's mouth opened, then closed. His hand, resting on the table, curled slowly into a fist. "I don't recall those exact words," he said finally. Miguel looked up from the paper. "I do," he said. "My father lost everything this way. I remember every word when I hear that conversation." Miss Collins scribbled something in her notebook so fast her pen squeaked. "What about the part where Clay said his elder law buddy could fast-track a guardianship petition?" Ward asked mildly. "Is that in there?" Miguel flipped a page. "Yes," he said, then read. Clay said, "The elder law attorney I work with can fast-track a guardianship petition if your father starts pushing back. You said he's been misplacing things, repeating stories." And Mark laughed and said, "Yeah, he tells me about my own childhood like I wasn't there. And he lost his glasses twice last month. We can make that work, right?" He set the papers down. "I signed this," he said, sliding them toward Ward. "Your office has a copy." Ward tapped the stack with one finger and looked at Clay. "Anything you'd like to add?" he asked. Clay had gone pale around the lips. "That conversation," he said slowly, "was informal. Hypothetical. We were talking about long-term planning options in general, not a specific decision to. You accepted a $75,000 wire that same morning. Maria cut in. That's not hypothetical where I come from." Mark slammed his palm on the table, making the speakerphone jump. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're twisting everything. I was trying to protect my father. From scammers, from himself. He's been making questionable choices." "Like what?" I asked. He gestured wildly. "You gave $5,000 to that church down the street last year after they guilt-tripped you with some fundraiser. You almost donated $10,000 to a stranger's GoFundMe because his dog needed surgery. You buy food you don't eat and let it rot. So your solution," I said, "was to siphon $62,000 into your own accounts and book me a future in a facility I didn't consent to. You wouldn't have agreed if I'd given you all the details," he shot back. "You get overwhelmed." "That's not protecting," I said. My voice rose despite my efforts. "That's stealing. Dressing it up as filial duty doesn't make it less theft." "Mr. Dawson," Ms. Collins said, "do you understand the transactions that took place? Do you feel you had a clear say in them?" "Yes," I said. "I understand them now. I did not then. And no, I did not have a clear say. Some of them, maybe. The rest happened in a fog. I didn't know someone else was spraying around me." "Are you afraid of your son?" she asked. I looked at Mark. His jaw was clenched, eyes narrowed, but there was no violence there. Just entitlement and panic. "I'm not afraid of him hitting me," I said. "I'm afraid of what he'll do to my life if I keep trusting him with it." Miss Collins nodded once, made another note. "I think we've heard enough to justify a deeper investigation," she said. "Mr. Ward, I'll coordinate with your office. Mr. Clay, expect a request for all logs and records pertaining to decisions made under the power of attorney. Digital and paper. Brookside will need a full copy of the admission file." "Of course," Ms. Hughes said quickly. She looked rattled in the way people do when they realize their bonus might be hovering over a shredder. Ward shuffled his papers and pulled out another document. "In the meantime," he said, "we have some immediate demands. 1. That all financial institutions cease recognizing any authority claimed by Mark Dawson under the revoked power of attorney. 2. that no moves be made toward any guardianship proceeding without court notice to my client and an opportunity for him to be evaluated by an independent physician of his choosing. 3. That any further use of Mr. Dawson's funds for Mark's personal benefits cease immediately. That's already the case, Maria said. We've removed him from the accounts and placed fraud flags on any attempts at new transfers to his accounts from Mr. Dawson's. Mark jolted. You what? She didn't flinch. Your father is our customer, she said. Not you. Our obligation is to protect him. He turned to me, incredulous. Dad, are you serious right now? He demanded. You went behind my back and let them paint me like some sort of criminal? After everything I've done for you. Behind your back. I repeated. You canceled my credit card behind my back. You moved $75,000 behind my back. I gestured to the table. This is me finally standing in front of you. This isn't you, he said. This is them. He waved at Ward, Maria, Miss Collins, even Miguel. You're letting strangers turn you against your own son. A stranger saved my father's money, I said. My son tried to save his own mortgage. He flushed. Speaking of which, Maria said, eyeing her phone where it had buzzed twice, there's something else. She looked at me. Richard, with your permission, I'd like to disclose a bit about related banking relationships that have come to our attention. Go ahead, I said. Your son's business line of credit and his home equity line are both with a partner bank that shares fraud data with us, she said. When we flagged the pattern of transfers from your account and the subsequent wire to Brookside, those systems noticed that his obligations were being serviced in part by funds originating with you. In English, I asked. She took a breath. In English, his bank is reviewing whether his lines were obtained under false pretenses or with undisclosed support from a potentially exploited elder, she said. I got a call on my way over. They've temporarily frozen his lines, pending review. Mark's eyes widened. What, he said. They can't. My entire cash flow runs through. They can, Maria said. And they have. As of about 20 minutes ago, according to the voicemail I just listened to in your lobby. He fumbled for his phone, tapping furiously. His face went from flushed to pale as whatever he saw there confirmed it. You have got to be kidding me, he muttered. This is insane. They can't just... My mortgage auto draft is due Friday. The payroll for my staff goes out Thursday. Mia's tuition is... Karma's funny that way. I said before I could stop myself. Shows up on a Monday instead of waiting for Sunday school. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the man across the table. You're enjoying this, he said. You like watching me scramble. After all I've done, you want to see me lose everything. No, I said, and this was the absolute truth. I don't want to see you lose everything. I want to see you realize that using other people's everything as your safety net has consequences. That's different. Ward put a hand on my forearm, a silent signal to let him steer again. We're not here to destroy your son's life, he said evenly. We're here to restore some balance. If Mr. Dawson decides later that he wants to forgive certain sums, that's his choice. But it will be his choice, not something you preemptively assume. Mark laughed harshly. Oh, please, he said. He wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for me helping him manage it the last few years. He would have thrown it away on what? I asked. Groceries? Heat? The occasional donation to people who didn't share my DNA. His mouth snapped shut. Mr. Dawson, Miss Collins said, do you wish for your son to have any continued access to your finances? Yes, I said. Mark's head jerked up, a flicker of hope crossing his face. As a cautionary tale, I added. Nothing more. The flicker died. Clay cleared his throat, grasping for some ground to regain. Perhaps we should take a step back, he said. Emotions are clearly running high. From a purely financial perspective, the steps we outlined, consolidation, structure management, potential assisted living, are entirely sensible for someone in Mr. Dawson's situation. Sensible if your priority is extracting fees, Ward said flatly. Less sensible if your priority is maintaining autonomy and preventing elder exploitation. We have compliance departments, Clay said, bristling. We take these issues seriously. Except when you're joking about fast-tracking guardianships on a balcony, Ward said. Clay's gaze darted to Miguel, measuring whether it was worth attacking him. He decided against it. Brookside, Ward continued, turning back to the screen. You have our written notice. I trust you'll refund any portion of the deposit that is not contractually locked with penalties, given that the principal himself had no direct interaction with you and suspect's exploitation. Ms. Hughes swallowed. Given today's information, she said, I believe we can classify this as a disputed authorization and issue a full refund once we receive your formal request and the APS report. We don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Excellent, Ward said. We'll send that request by close of business. He turned to me. Anything else you'd like to say, Richard? He asked. I hadn't prepared a speech. I'm not a speech guy, but standing in that glass room, overlooking the lobby where I'd sat with a canceled card and a blueberry muffin, something in me straightened. I looked at Clay first. I trusted you because my son said you were a professional, I said. I assumed that meant you'd treat my money with at least as much caution as I did. Turns out your due diligence stops at whoever signs the check. Then I looked at Ms. Hughes on the screen. I'm sure Brook City has nice furniture and good lighting, I said. But if your business model depends on sons like mine bringing in fathers like me without talking to us first, you might want to re-examine your brochures about dignity. Finally, I looked at Mark. You, I said, and the word felt heavier than anything I'd signed in the last 2 weeks. I have given you money for a school trip, for college, for a car, for a failed business, for another business, for your wedding, for your kids. I wrote checks. I handed you envelopes. I co-signed loans. There's no ledger that can capture that. I don't regret the majority of it. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. But this, I said, tapping the stack of bank statements with my finger, this is different. This wasn't you asking. This was you assuming. This was you rearranging my life around your convenience. Canceling my card, lowering my cash, planning my placement like I'm furniture you're tired of dusting. My voice shook on the last word. I let it. When your mother and I talked about our old age, I went on. We expected some indignities. Bad knees, pills in little plastic cases, maybe some memory lapses. We didn't expect to have to hire a lawyer to protect ourselves from our own son. His jaw clenched. Dad, no, I said. You can explain yourself to my lawyer. To APS. Maybe to a judge, if it goes that far. You don't get to explain away the look on my face when my card was declined out there while you were in here, cashing me in. The room was quiet. Somewhere below us, in the lobby, a coffee machine hummed. Someone laughed, faintly. Life going on, as indifferent to family tragedies as it is to stock market swings. Ward closed his folder. I think that's enough for today, he said. Next steps. Richard and I will finalize revisions to his estate plan. APS will pursue their investigation. Harris and Cole will cooperate fully, I'm sure. Brookside will process the refund. First Valley will maintain the safeguards we discussed. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Clay rose too. I was already calculating damage control. Richard, he said, forcing a smile, whatever happens, know that we only ever wanted to act in your best interest. Funny, I said, standing. That's what the guy who sold me a lemon car in '78 said too. Ms. Hughes signed off with a flurry of assurances and a too bright smile. The screen went dark. Ms. Collins closed her notebook. I'll be in touch, Mr. Dawson, she said. If your son contacts you with threats or pressure, document it. Save all messages. Call 911 if you feel unsafe, and call me after. Thank you, I said. She left, followed by Maria, who squeezed my arm again. You did well, Maria said. This isn't easy. Neither is telling a forklift operator he's fired, I said. One just has more paper. She laughed once, sharp and sympathetic, then was gone. Miguel came around the table, hat still in his hands. You all right? He asked. I think so, I said. You? He shrugged. I said what I heard. That's all a man can do. More than most, I said. Ward and I headed toward the door. Mark stood up abruptly. Dad, wait, he said. You can't just walk out of here like this and pretend that we're strangers. Ward paused, looked at me. Do you want to step out for a moment? He asked. No, I said. Stay. I turned to Mark. We're not strangers, I said. That's the problem. If you were a stranger, this would be simple. I'd press charges, never see you again, and move on with whatever time I got left. His throat worked. So don't press charges, he said. We can fix this between us. I'll undo the Brooksida thing. I'll pay back some of the transfers when I can. Just don't sick these people on me. You sick yourself, I said, when you decided my money was more yours than mine. He swallowed. His eyes glistened. Just a little, and for a moment I saw the 16-year-old who stood in the kitchen with the crumpled Europetrip brochure, hopeful and scared. I was just trying to make sure you were okay, he said. You don't see how close you are to not being able to manage this stuff. I see exactly how close I am, I said. That's why I'm here now, instead of waiting until someone else writes my story for me. For a heartbeat, we just looked at each other. Two men with the same nose, standing on opposite sides of a line neither of us had expected to draw. Come on, Richard, Ward said gently. Let's go. We walked out of the Jefferson room. The glass door clicked shut behind us. Outside, the lobby hummed along. Sophia pretended to sort papers. A man in a suit checked his watch by the elevator. The TV showed footage of a stock exchange floor, people shouting and gesturing at screens. As we passed the row of plants by the window, Miguel lifted his spray bottle and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. We stepped out through the revolving doors into the sunlight. For the first time in weeks, the air felt like it belonged to me. Behind me, in that polished lobby, my son was probably calling his bank, his lawyer, his wife. Explaining, spinning, panicking. For years, I've been the one sitting and waiting while he handled everything. Now he was the one with frozen lines and questions to answer. Sometimes karma doesn't come crashing through the ceiling. Sometimes it walks out the front door quietly, leaving you inside to face your own reflection in the glass. Ward and I didn't say much on the sidewalk outside Harrison Cole. He checked his watch, squinted at the sky like he was gauging the weather of the whole situation, not just the clouds. You eaten? He asked. Coffee and adrenaline, I said. Not in that order. There's a diner 2 blocks down, he said. Best bag coffee in the county. Let's sit for a bit, talk next steps. The diner was called Sunnyside, which was optimistic for a place with flickering neon and a crack in the front window, taped in an X with brown packing tape. Inside, the air smelled like bacon grease and burned toast. It felt honest. We slid into a booth. The vinyl squeaked under me. A waitress with tired eyes and bright pink nails poured us coffee without asking. What's the verdict? I asked after she left. How bad is it? For him and for me. Ward stirred sugar in his cup, watching the spoon. For you, he said. Short answer. You're safer than you were yesterday. Brooks and I's going to refund the $75. Harris and Cole will tread very carefully from now on. Your accounts are locked down with extra protections. The power of attorney is dead. APS is involved. That's a good firewall. And for Mark? I asked. He sighed. That depends, he said. APS will do their investigation. They'll look at the bank records, Miguel's statement, your account, the timeline. If they find what I think they'll find, they'll write up a report. The DA's office may or may not decide to prosecute. They rarely jump straight to criminal charges if there's room for restitution. So he might not see a courtroom, I said. He's already seen one with glass walls and a conference phone, Ward said. Trust me, that experience will echo. But legally, we're more likely to end up in a settlement room than a criminal trial. That's just how these things go. The waitress slid plates in front of us. Ward's omelet, my BLT. The toast was a little burnt. It felt appropriate. What do you want? Ward asked, picking up his fork. Not in the abstract. In practice. I stared at my sandwich. Bacon, lettuce, tomato, mayo. A simple stack of things that worked better together than most families. I want my money back, I said. Not every dime I ever spent on him. Just the stuff he took without asking. I want him out of my accounts, out of my medical decisions, out of any legal control over where I live. I want to know that when I swipe a card for a bottle of water, it will work because I say so, not because my son decided it passes his approval. Ward nodded. That part we can do. And I want him to feel it, I added quietly. Not ruin his life. Just feel what it's like to have the ground move under you because of someone else's choices. Ward chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, wiped his mouth. Karma, he said. Or physics, I said. Every action, equal and opposite reaction. I slept through that part in school. Waking up to it now. The next 2 months tasted like paperwork. On April 27th, I got a certified letter from Brookside. Dear Mr. Dawson, pursuant to correspondence from your legal counsel and Adult Protective Services, Brookside Residences has placed a full hold on a $75,000 deposit received on April 17, 2023. After internal review, we have determined to refund the deposit in full to the originating account at First Valley Credit Union within 10 to 14 business days. I pinned that letter to the fridge with the tomato magnet, right next to an old picture of Linda laughing with her mouth full of cake. She would have enjoyed the phrase internal review. On May 3rd, another envelope arrived, this one from APS. Thicker. Serious. Ms. Collins's name was at the bottom of the letter. Our investigation has substantiated concerns of financial exploitation involving your son, Mark Dawson, and your financial accounts. They concluded there was a preponderance of evidence that Mark had used his access to my accounts for his own benefit without my full knowledge or consent. They noted that I remained cognitively capable of managing my affairs. They recommended increased monitoring, kept the case open for follow-up, and forwarded their findings to the county's Elder Fraud Unit for potential civil or criminal action. I read that last part 3 times. Potential, not guaranteed. Life rarely guarantees anything except the ending. On May 10th, Ward called. Big day, he said. Brookside refund hit your account. 75 on the nose. Feels like someone put a piece of my spine back in, I said. And there's more, he added. I could hear papers rustling. The DA's office reviewed the APS file. They're not pursuing criminal charges, for now. They're instead encouraging us to seek civil restitution and have indicated they'll reconsider if your son fails to cooperate. In English, I said. In English, Mark has a chance to make this right-ish before the state decides to make it worse, Ward said. I've drafted a settlement proposal. You want to hear the highlights? Hit me, I said. Number 1. He acknowledges in writing that certain transfers were not fully authorized, Ward said. Number 2. He agrees to a repayment schedule for a portion of the $62,500 that moved into his account. We're not going for all of it. I know you did agree to some help. I've pegged $30,000 as a reasonable number to demand back over 5 years. No interest if he doesn't miss a payment. Interest if he does. $30,000, I repeated. That's actually less than I expected. This isn't about squeezing him, Ward said. It's about establishing that the money isn't his by right. Symbolism matters in families, sometimes more than numbers. Fair, I said. Number 3, he went on, he relinquishes any and all claims to act as your agent, financial, medical, legal, now and in the future. He signs that he will not pursue guardianship without explicit agreement from APS and a court-appointed evaluator. Good, I said. The word tasted clean. And number 4, Ward concluded, he agrees that any inheritance he receives will be entirely at your discretion, with no expectation based on past support. In return, we agree not to push for criminal charges as long as he sticks to the deal. So he gets to walk away without handcuffs, I said. For now, Ward said. Again, karma, not the criminal code. At least not yet. 3 days later, Ward called again. He accepted, he said. Grumbled, swore, blamed me, blamed APS, blamed the system, but in the end he signed. Because he's guilty or because he's scared? I asked. Those two things often travel together, Ward said dryly. He had his own lawyer on the call. They both advised him this was the best he was going to get. There was a pause. He also wrote something, Ward added. Not sure if you want it. What? I asked. A letter, Ward said. An apology of sorts. More self-pity than I'd like, but some accountability slipped in around the edges. I can mail it or keep it in the file. Up to you. I thought of Mark's face in the conference room as Miguel read his words back to him. The anger, the indignation, the flicker of shame. Send it, I said. If I don't like it, I can always use it to start the barbecue. While lawyers and apartments and acronyms did their slow, grinding work, I did mine. Ward and I spent 2 long afternoons in his office revising my estate plan. First, the numbers. Current assets, excluding the IRA, he said, scribbling on a legal pad. Brookside refund included, minus the sustained expenses, rent, utilities, your modest living costs. Roughly $315,000 liquid between checking, savings, CD. Your IRA's at about $220,000, based on the last statement. House is gone. No big debts. Not bad, Richard. Could have been a lot worse, I said, if I kept nodding along in lobbies. He smiled. So, he said, what do you want these numbers to do when you're gone? It's one thing to joke about dying when you're 69 and the doctor tells you your blood pressure's pretty good considering. It's another to sit at a polished desk, pen in hand, and decide where your last dollars will land. I want less of it going to the boy who tried to cash me in early, I said. More of it going to people who did the opposite. We broke it down. 40% to a nonprofit that funds legal aid and advocacy for seniors dealing with exactly what I'd just gone through. Ward gave me a list. I did my own research with a magnifying glass and a notepad, circling one called the Elder Defense Project. They got Miguel's father's settlement a few years back, Ward said when he saw my choice. Good people. That sealed it. 20% to the community health clinic where Linda went for her checkups after my employer changed insurance and our old doctor stopped taking it. They treated her like a person, not a billing opportunity. 10% to the county library system, Linda's second religion. Books and blood pressure pills kept me alive this long, I told Ward. Seems fair to pay that forward. Another 20% into a trust for Mia and Ethan, my grandchildren. They'd be able to access it for education or a down payment on a first home after age 25, with the trust managed by a third-party trustee, not Mark. He can't touch it? I asked. No, Ward said. Not as trustee, not as signatory, not as anything. We'll build it so he could die in debt up to his eyeballs, and these funds would still go to them, not to his creditors. I pictured Mia in her soccer uniform, Ethan building Lego rockets on my living room floor. None of this was their fault. And the rest? Ward asked. The last 10% we divided into smaller thank yous. 5% to be split between Miguel and his wife, as a gift now, not later. Enough to pay off whatever debts his brother had left their father with, and then some. They'll never expect that, Ward said, looking almost pleased. That's the point, I said. Decent people never do. The final 5% I earmarked in little bequests. $2,000 for Maria's grandkids' college fund, $1,000 for Mrs. Patel in 3C for her kindness and her samosas, and so on. Nothing life-changing, but enough to say you mattered. You were on my side when it counted. And your son? Ward asked finally. I'd thought about that more than anything else. Legally, I could disinherit him entirely, Ward said. You're not obligated to leave him a cent. I know, I said. I also know leaving him nothing will turn into a story he tells forever. My father cut me out. I was the victim. I'd rather write the ending myself. Ward arched an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? A token amount, I said. $1. Enough to make it clear he was considered and declined. And perhaps something less tangible, Ward suggested. A letter to be attached as an exhibit to the will, explaining your reasoning in your own words. We both looked at the blank page in front of me. I'll need time for that, I said. Take it, he said. We'll draft the rest now. You can bring me the letter when you're ready. We'll attach it as an addendum. He shuffled papers, the printer word. The notary came in with her stamp. I signed my name more times than I could count that day. Each signature another cancellation of the old story and a line in the new one. Walking home afterward, my hand ached from the pen. My heart oddly hurt less. Mark's letter arrived on May 18th. Standard white envelope. His handwriting on the front, slanted like it always had been. Inside, 3 pages of lined paper, densely filled. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, opened it. Dad, Ward suggested I write this. He called it an apology letter, but I'm not great at those, so I'm just going to say what I can and let you decide what to call it. He started with himself. Of course he did. How stressed he'd been. How the business was always on the edge. How the kids' tuition weighed on him. How he'd felt alone in it all. Then, to be fair, the words began to shift. I told myself I was protecting you from scammers, from making mistakes, from ending up broke. I also told myself that everything in your accounts was basically family money, and that using it to keep my family afloat was part of the plan. But the truth is I never asked you what your plan was. I just assumed mine was better. There it was. Not perfect, but there. When Miguel, yeah, I know his name now, read back what I'd said on that balcony, I wanted to sink through the floor. I sounded like someone talking about an asset, not a person, not my father. I'm not going to pretend I did all this for you. I did a lot of it for me, because I was scared, because I thought I deserved a safety net after everything I'd done for you and Mom. That sounds worse written down than it did in my head. I'm agreeing to this repayment plan because I don't want to see you in court. I'm also agreeing to get out of your financial life because, clearly, I've proven I can't be trusted with that role. He apologized in his way, said, "I'm sorry," 3 times, twice with qualifications, once clean. "I'm sorry I canceled your card without talking to you. I'm sorry I treated your money like a spreadsheet instead of like your life. I'm sorry for making you feel like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected." By the end, my eyes were blurry enough I had to bring the page closer. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't really deserve it. But I hope someday, if you think of me, it's not just as the son who stole from you, but also as the kid you sent to Europe when you couldn't afford it, the college grad you cheered for, the father to grandkids." I know that's asking a lot. "Mark." I folded the letter back along its creases and sat there for a long time, listening to the clock tick. Forgiveness is a strange currency. You can't demand it. You can't earn it with interest. Sometimes you spend it on people who never even say thank you. Sometimes you hold on to it and it rots. I didn't know what I was going to do with his apology, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to let it buy back my blindness. I put the letter in the blue folder between the APS report and the new draft of my will. June settled in, hot and humid. The box fan I'd picked up at Walmart for $19.99 rattled in my bedroom window at night. I started going to the senior center 3 blocks away on Tuesdays for bingo and bad coffee and the chance to sit in a room full of people who like to complain about the same things I complained about. That's where I ran into Maria one afternoon. She was there visiting her mother, who was annihilating everyone at Domino's. "How's retirement from being robbed?" Maria asked, dropping into the chair next to me. "Quiet," I said. "Got myself a new hobby, saying no." She laughed. "Mark?" she asked. "Haven't seen him in person since the meeting," I said. "Text now and then. Mostly about the kids. Shorter than they used to be." "How's he doing?" she asked. "Financially." I shrugged. "He had to sell the Audi," I said. "Saw him in a Honda on Maple last week. Business line of credit got downgraded. His banker called me. Wanted to know if I'd corroborate that his cash flow was improving. I said my days of corroborating his fantasies are over. She grinned. "Good for you." I heard, I lowered my voice automatically, that Mia's at public school this fall. They couldn't swing the private tuition after all the freezes. Maria winced. "Kid's okay with that." "Mia's thrilled," I said. "Her best friend goes there. Mark's the one sulking. Public school isn't part of his brand." "That's not nothing, you know," Maria said. "Natural consequences. Without you having to do much." "I did enough," I said. "The rest is just gravity." Miguel and his wife came by my apartment in late June. He called ahead, very formal. "Senior Dawson," he'd said, "we got a letter from your lawyer. I think you did something crazy." The crazy was a direct transfer of $15,000 into their account with a note. For Miguel and Elena Alvarez, in appreciation for telling the truth when it mattered. They brought tamales. His wife, Elena, had small hands and a calm face. She hugged me like she'd known me for years. "You didn't have to do this," Miguel said, standing in my cramped kitchen, holding the check copy like it might explode. "Yes, I did," I said. "You helped me keep my life. Least I can do is help you clean up the damage your brother left behind." He shook his head. "My father died owing $30,000, he said. "We paid and paid. I thought that story was finished." Now he swallowed. "Now my children start different." Elena pressed a container into my hands. "Extra tamales," she said, "for the freezer." We sat at the table, eating and talking. It felt less like paying someone back and more like tilting the world a few degrees toward fairness, just for an evening. Before they left, Miguel caught my eye. "You know," he said, "when I heard your son out there, I thought, this man is going to lose everything." "Not you. Him. Because once a father closes his heart, there is no bank that can open it again." "Has yours?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes not. He shrugged. It is a long story. But I know this. You are doing something my father never did. You are saying, enough. That changes more than bank balances. After they left, I counted the tamales in my freezer. 12. A dozen small, wrapped reminders that not everyone with access to your life wants to take something away. The second big scene, the other bookend to that lobby humiliation, came in August. It was a Wednesday. The date on the kitchen calendar said 08/23/2023 in red ink. I remember because I'd circled it earlier in the month as check HeartMed's refill. Big plans. At 6:17 p.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. Not the light, polite tap of Mrs. Patel with a plate of samosas. Not the clumsy pound of the UPS guy. Somewhere in between. Hesitant. Too many pauses. I opened it. Mark stood in the hallway, holding a six-pack of cheap grocery store iced tea like a peace offering. "Hey, Dad," he said. He looked smaller. Not literally, he was still a few inches taller than me, but the edges were softer. His hair needed a cut. The stainless steel watch was gone, replaced by something modest. He wore a blue polo shirt with his company logo on it, and jeans that had seen some work. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. The living room looked the same. Sagging couch, TV on the cheap stand, coffee table with ring stains. He glanced around like he expected to see his own ghost on the furniture. "It hasn't changed much," he said. "Why would it?" I asked. "It works." He set the iced tea on the counter. "I didn't know what you were drinking these days," he said. "Figured this was safe." "Tea is always safe," I said. "It doesn't ask for your password." He gave a short, nervous laugh. "Can we sit?" he asked. We sat at the kitchen table. I'd wiped it down earlier, out of habit. Linda always said, bad news sits better on a clean table. Up close, I could see the lines around his eyes had deepened. Stress carves its own maps. "I heard from Ward," he began. He sent me a copy of the final trust documents. The will. The whole package. "Good," I said. "I didn't want you to hear it from some cousin at a funeral." He swallowed. "You're really leaving me $1, he said, voice flat. "Yes," I said. "And the rest goes to charities, the kids, random people like the gardener and your bank lady," he said. "Miguel has a name," I said. "So who does Maria?" "And they're not random. They stood up when you sat down." He looked away, jaw working. "I guess I should be grateful you left me anything," he said. "It's not generosity," I said. "It's a footnote. A legal way of saying, I considered you and made a choice." We sat there for a moment, the fan in the corner humming. "I didn't come here to ask you to change it," he said suddenly. "Didn't you?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not exactly." "Then what?" I asked. "Another loan? Co-sign something? That's off the menu." He met my eyes. "I know," he said. "I got that part. Loud and clear. No more money. No more accounts. No more safety nets with your name on them." "Good," I said. "We're aligned." He took a deep breath. "I came to say I'm trying," he said, "to do what you said. To stand on my own feet instead of yours." "How's that working out?" I asked. He snorted. "Badly," he said. "The business took a hit when the credit line froze. I had to lay off my assistant, move the office into the spare bedroom. The mortgage company isn't thrilled with me. We might have to sell the house next year if things don't turn around." "And the kids?" I asked. "Mia's in public school," he said. "She loves it, actually. More friends, more sports. Ethan doesn't notice much as long as he has Legos. Lisa's adjusting. She married a guy with an Audi and a country club membership. Now she's got a man who drives a Honda and shops at Aldi." "Welcome to the club," I said. "We have better snacks." He cracked a smile, then sobered. "I know you probably don't want to hear this," he said, "but getting cut off forced me to see some things. About how I think. About what I think I deserve." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I've spent my whole life telling myself a story where I'm the good son," he said. "The responsible one. The one who shows up. And I did show up, most of the time. But somewhere along the way, I turned that into a tab. I did this, so I deserve that. I didn't see the difference between you giving freely and me taking quietly." He looked at me. "You took loudly," I said. "The volume just got turned up in that conference room." He nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't. But I'm hoping, I don't know, that maybe when you're gone, the kids will know you didn't hate me completely." "I don't hate you," I said. The words surprised me with how easy they were to say. I'm disappointed, angry, hurt, but I don't hate you. He blinked fast. You left me $1, he said, half laughing, half choking. That's a pretty loud disappointment. I left you $1 in the will, I said. Not in my heart. He frowned. What does that even mean, he asked. It means, I said slowly, that when I'm dead, the money will go where I think it should. To people and places that didn't treat me like an account number. And you'll get a piece of paper that says $1 and a letter that explains why. That's the last thing I can control. And while you're alive, he asked softly. While I'm alive, I said, we get to decide what we do with this. I waved a hand between us without a calculator. We can decide if we talk at Christmas. If I see the kids' school plays. If you call me when your car breaks down. Not to ask for money, but because you're sitting on the side of the road and you're bored. He stared at the table. So there's still something, he said. Yes, I said. There's still something. It just doesn't have a routing number anymore. He let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for months. Okay, he said. Okay. We sat in silence. The fridge hummed. Someone in the apartment above dragged furniture or a body across the floor. I need to ask you for one thing, he said finally. There it is, I said. Go on. Not money, he added quickly. Words. I waited. When the kids are older, he said, and they ask what happened, because they will when the trust kicks in and they see how it's structured. Can you not paint me as a monster? I thought about Miguel's father, about Mark's letter, about the word monster, how it lets people off the hook by making their actions inhuman, when they're almost always painfully, disappointingly human. I'll tell them the truth, I said, that their father made some bad choices with my money, that I had to protect myself, that he signed a paper saying he was sorry and paid some of it back, that he came over one night with cheap iced tea and asked his old man not to turn him into the villain of the story. His eyes shone. And will you tell them anything good? He asked. I thought of the Europet trip, the science fair ribbon, the day he drove me to the hospital when Linda's heart first started acting up, hands shaking on the wheel. I'll tell them you were a good kid, I said, and that being a good kid doesn't guarantee you'll be a good man. That part you have to keep earning. He nodded, swallowing hard. I can live with that, he said. We finished our tea. He stood awkward. I should go, he said. Lisa's making something with quinoa. She wants me to eat like I plan to be around. Tell her I said hi, I said, and that quinoa is just rice with a publicist. He laughed, genuinely this time. At the door, he hesitated. Dad, he said, yeah, I know you don't want this, but if you ever need anything, rides, groceries, someone to yell at the pharmacy about a copay. I have a bus pass and a mouth, I said, but I'll keep it in mind. He nodded. Okay, he said. I'll call about the kids. Do that, I said. He left. The hallway swallowed him. I closed the door gently. In the quiet that followed, I stood in the middle of my kitchen and let myself feel all of it. Anger, relief, sadness, something like hope, and something like mourning. It washed through me, messy and unorganized like my spice cabinet. On the table, under a coaster, lay the draft of the letter Ward had asked me to write to attach to the will. I've been working on it in bits and pieces. I sat down and picked up my pen. At the top, I wrote, to whom it may concern, especially my son. Then I told the story. Not the whole saga, just the spine. The card in the lobby, the gardener by the window, the bank statements, the conference room, the choices that followed. I wrote about love and money and where they should overlap and where they absolutely shouldn't. I ended it like this. I do not leave you nothing because I stopped loving you. I leave you almost nothing because I stopped trusting you. Love can be given again. Trust cannot. Not by me, not in this lifetime. Use this $1 as a reminder. It is the last cent of mine you will ever spend. I put down the pen. My hand didn't shake. Later that night, I made myself a simple dinner. Grilled cheese, tomato soup from a can, sliced apple. I ate it in front of the TV while some games show flash questions I mostly knew the answers to. Before bed, I opened my wallet. The useless blue Visa was gone now. Ward had suggested I close that account entirely and start fresh with a new card, new limits, new alerts. I had a new card, green, not blue, tucked behind my Medicare card. It felt like a tool, not a leash. Behind it, I kept a folded photo of Linda as always. I slid my finger along the edge of the new card, thinking my son had canceled the old one without asking, as I sat in a lobby waiting for someone else to tell me the plan for my life. Now I had a different kind of card. Not plastic. Not in my wallet. In my head, I held a quiet, hard-won decision. The line of credit my son had with me, the one denominated in trust, not dollars, was closed. No phone app could reopen it. No negotiated settlement could bump up its limit. No, I'm sorry, could erase the red line in my ledger. Other accounts remained open. Love, memory, shared history, maybe even some future afternoons with the grandkids at the park, feeding duck stale bread, because we forgot to bring anything healthier. But this one account, the one he'd been overdrawing on for years without seeing the numbers, it was done. I turned off the light, lay down, and listened to the fan rattle. Outside, somewhere in the city, my son was probably looking at his own bank balance, feeling the pinch of promises he'd made with other people's money. Call it karma. Call it cause and effect. Call it a long-delayed audit. To me, it was simple. The last card I canceled wasn't the one in my wallet. It was him.